What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Unlockables podcast, the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. As always, I am your host. My name is Eric. I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in wherever, whenever in time and space you may be located. It means so much to me that you're willing to stop by and check out the show and see what is going on in the world of video games. Before we dive into our episode today, I'd just like to remind you here at the top to check out linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. All the links are there to all the Unlockables social media, to the Unlockables Discord, to the Unlockables Patreon. So make sure you check those things out. Go give those things a like and a follow, or whatever the subscribing thing that you need to do for each of those social medias is. It's the best way to keep up with everything that is going on at the show, find out about new and upcoming projects. If you sign up for the Patreon, you get access to all of these episodes. As soon as I'm finished with editing them, I upload them to the Patreon early access for people that have those. Sometimes they're months in advance that you can hear these episodes, so you don't have to wait months for me to get around to releasing them. Of course, all this stuff will still be available on the main feed, so the Patreon is only if you feel like supporting the show a little bit more, and if you do, I'd like to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Please also specifically go check out the Unlockables YouTube channel, because I'm doing a lot more stuff there. I have a lot of ideas for more in-depth videos that I'd like to do, more in the vein of my Kingdom Hearts series, do a little more like lore and theme breakdowns of whole games, maybe specific elements of certain games that I really like. So go and check that out. Make sure to drop a subscribe and like what is going on there currently. The most recent things I have on there are probably a video about my time with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and a retrospective on the 30th anniversary of Chrono Trigger. So go check out the Unlockables YouTube channel. And again, all those links can be found at linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. With that stuff out of the way, let's dive into today's episode, which is on Dynasty Warriors Origins. Dynasty Warriors Origins is a hack-and-slash game developed by Omega Force and published by Koei Tecmo. It is the 10th mainline entry in the Dynasty Warriors franchise, when you don't count spin-off games like Extreme Legends or Empires or any other like mobile games that came out, but we'll cover that in just a second. Like the games that precede it, Dynasty Warriors Origins is based on the Chinese novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms. This is a 14th century historical novel whose authorship was attributed to Luo Guanzhong. Just a quick side note here, this episode will have a lot of names of the Chinese origins, so if I butcher any of these names, I do apologize. The novel is like a half documentary, half romanticized account of a period of Chinese history which takes place from roughly the end of the Han Dynasty circa the 180s AD and the reunification of the land of China. So this is about a 100-year span of time. While the story includes hundreds of historical figures whose lives are somewhat romanticized and dramatized, the novel focuses on the three-way division of the land following the collapse of the Han Dynasty, a period of time known as the Three Kingdoms era. Very creative there. The book contains nearly 800,000 words, over 1,000 historically dramatized characters, and is divided into 120 chapters. These great classical novels of Chinese literature, their influence in this region specifically has been compared to that of Shakespeare for English literature. All these novels were written in different time periods, whereas Shakespeare is kind of more specific on a specific point in time. Dynasty Warriors Origins, the game specifically, was developed in Koei Tecmo's in-house game engine known as the Katana engine, which has been used in games like Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, Wild Hearts, and Rise of the Ronin. Instead of using a widely used industry engine like Unreal, Koei Tecmo president Hisashi Koinuma said that there was inherent advantages to using an in-house engine, such as attracting talented programmers and allowing them to understand the entire game development process in terms of that engine, rather than just specializing in something in a widely used engine. So, interesting philosophy and approach by Koei Tecmo here. It gives people who work for them a wider view of the entire game development process, because they don't just have to come in and take a job that they're specialized to do, like in something like Unreal Engine. Koei Tecmo takes them in and is like, hey, if you work on our in-house engine that we're kind of built and refined over the years, you can have a better understanding of the game development process as a whole, not just from a super specified role. You can have a larger involvement in it beyond what you were just specifically hired for. The Katana engine has continued to evolve and improve with each new game that comes out, and with each new game that Koei Tecmo works on, the team adds new tools and refinements to meet the challenge of that specific game. So they keep kind of updating it as they go along, as they build and release each game, to the point where it has become this engine which has a lot of tools specific to the types of games that Koei Tecmo makes. Dynasty Warriors Origins was released on January 17th, 2025 for the PS5, Xbox, and Windows. This was a worldwide release. Getting into some review scores here on the aggregator Metacritic, it is sitting at a 84 out of 100 for the PC version, a 79 out of 100 for the PS5 version, and a 79 out of 100 on the Xbox Series version. On OpenCritic, it has a 79% recommend. And then getting into some of the publications here, Destructoid gave Dynasty Warriors Origins a 9.5 out of 10. Digital Trends gave it a 3 out of 5. Famitsu gave it a 38 out of 40. GameSpot gave it a 7 out of 10. Games Radar Plus a 4 out of 5. Hardcore Gamer 4 out of 5. IGN 9 out of 10. PC Gamer 75 out of 100. Push Square 8 out of 10. RP Gamer 4 out of 5. Tech Radar 4 out of 5. VG247 5 out of 5. And VideoGamer.com 6 out of 10. So a wide array of review scores for Dynasty Warriors Origins, from like the 6 out of 10 to almost the 10 out of 10. Kind of a 4-point swing, it just kind of depending on the outlet. So that's interesting. We'll get into that and kind of talk about the experience in a second. As of February 2025, Koei Tecmo announced that the game had surpassed 1 million units sold worldwide, which definitely a very big success for a Dynasty Warriors game, for sure. Getting into my personal experience with Dynasty Warriors Origins, with the series as a whole, I've been a fan of the Dynasty Warriors games and the style of game that they kind of pioneered, called musou games in general, for a very, very long time. And again, musou is a term that defines the type of gameplay that was pioneered by Dynasty Warriors, which is essentially this like 1 versus 100, one man versus an army power fantasy. Musou is the name of the story mode in Dynasty Warriors and the name of the special power bar used to unleash devastating attacks. So that term has just kind of stuck with the games as they've come out and kind of defined that genre. When I was first introduced to the Dynasty Warriors series specifically, I remember that this was a cousin game. This was a game that my cousin introduced to me. I remember going over to his house one day and him showing me this game called Dynasty Warriors 3. And we played co-op mode, and he explained to me how the game worked. And I was hooked on the premise, like immediately, just completely obsessed with it. It was such a crazy concept to me at such a young age. Dynasty Warriors 3, I believe, would have been pretty early on in the PS2's life cycle. And around this time, I was just getting into things like Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. So that was kind of my basis for video games. And for combat specifically, I loved Final Fantasy IX's turn-based combat, and then Kingdom Hearts was kind of my introduction to like an action style of RPG. But playing Dynasty Warriors 3 having this one guy that would go around and just fight hundreds of dudes at a time was such an insane thing for me to be looking at on the screen as I played the game. I control the guy that just ran around and could just destroy armies of other guys. I mean, as a kid, this appealed to my hero fantasy, and I think it probably appealed to a lot of people's hero fantasies, being this person of incredible power who could make final stands and turn the tide of gigantic battles single-handedly. That's the common male fantasy, right? I think it's still the normal male fantasy to die in a final stand, holding off enemies while your friends escape. That's how men want to die. I didn't really care that I couldn't pronounce the names of the characters or really even like follow the story of what was going on. And at that time, I didn't even know that the game was loosely referencing or kind of following historical events or based on this really important novel from Chinese history. All I cared about was this power fantasy and how good it felt to just smash bad guys by the hundreds, and literally the hundreds. I ended up getting an entry in the series shortly after. I'm not sure if it was for a birthday or a holiday, but it wasn't Dynasty Warriors 3 I ended up getting. It was Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends, which is like a spin-off / add-on game that had new content based around some of the other characters that weren't affiliated with the main Three Kingdoms characters. Today, if that sort of thing was to come out, Extreme Legends would just be like DLC that added additional story content, but at that time it was like its own separate thing. After that, I remember being entrenched in the series. I picked up the next few mainline games in Dynasty Warriors 4, 5, and 6, and one of the new spin-offs, Empires, I don't really remember which one specifically that one was for. Empires was kind of a mix of Dynasty Warriors and the tactical game Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a series of strategy games that they were well known for before putting out Dynasty Warriors. I remember even playing some of the other Koei Tecmo musou games like Samurai Warriors, which I believe is the same thing but just based in Japan, but I just, for whatever reason, didn't carry on with that series. I didn't like it as much as Dynasty Warriors. After that, I went away from the series for a little while. I missed 7, 8, and 9 because I heard that they were pretty repetitive and they got pretty bad review scores. I was also just playing other things at that time. Like I've said before, the decade of the 2010s was dominated by shooters for me. That's what I was playing a lot of. But during my peak hype times for Dynasty Warriors, I remember discovering that the game was kind of loosely based in fouled historical events. And I was so obsessed with that time period. I wrote a major English paper on the Three Kingdoms period for one of my English class finals where we could write a big paper on like any topic we wanted to. And so I picked this period of like the collapse of the Han Dynasty through the Three Kingdoms period to write like a 10-page paper on, because I was just a nerdy kid. I could have written about anything. I could have written about like sports or just anything else. But no, as like a senior in high school or junior in high school, I wrote about the fucking Three Kingdoms period for my English class. What a nerd. I played one other musou game before I came back to the series with Dynasty Warriors Origins, and that was Fire Emblem Warriors, because that game combined my love of Fire Emblem with the Dynasty Warriors formula. I won't really go into it too much. It kind of utilizes both the Dynasty Warriors formula and some Fire Emblem things in the way you can like command troops and command people to go to different places, but I won't be getting into that here. But getting to kill thousands of dudes as Marth, or like my favorite Fire Emblem characters, was like Ryoma from Fates. Insane. Sign me up. I was hooked on it immediately. I remember seeing the trailer for Origins. I don't remember if it was like a year ago or 2 years ago, and it really looked like a significant step forward. The core gameplay of the series looked like it remained, but it looked more like a modern game with literal thousands of enemies on screen at once. And it looked like there were some like dodging and control elements that looked to be incorporated from current modern day action games. Think about Final Fantasy 16 or God of War, or if you've played any like third person Sony action game in the last like 5 to 10 years, it's utilizing a lot of stuff like that. Even maybe some Souls-ish elements here and there, although I don't want to use like the Souls comparison. Just be like, oh yeah, it's got stuff from Sekiro in it, because I want to do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis than just the shallow, yeah, it's got stuff from Souls games in it. So as soon as I saw that, and it looked like an incredible game, the old fire kind of sprung up inside me, and I knew that this was going to be a day one purchase. And it absolutely was, and we'll go over my thoughts here in just a second. I love this type of game, and I love this historical period specifically. It's a time period filled with so much intrigue and betrayal and political maneuvering, alliances that are made and broken, mythologized heroes and villains. And it's insane that I got the inspiration to learn more about this time in history from a video game. There hasn't ever really been another game that I've played that has caused me to be like, oh, let me go and learn more about this time period, except for maybe like early in the life cycle of FPS, as FPS was kind of getting off the ground. A lot of the shooters were like historical world, like every shooter that came out was like a World War II shooter. But I was already kind of like familiar with World War II, and every boy / man goes through his World War II phase where you just want to learn more about it. And so I already kind of like knew about World War II, but there hasn't been another game like Dynasty Warriors that's made me go, oh, like let me go learn about this, to learn about like the lives of the major players and characters in this story of Liu Bei, Cao Cao, Sun Jian, and like the myth of the indomitable Lu Bu and the scramble for power during the collapse of China's golden age. Out of all of the games in the series, I would say it's a bit early for me to play Dynasty Warriors Origins, because to this day I'm still going back and playing it and discovering things about it. But I would say for my favorite entry, it's a tie between 4 and 5. Something about those early games, like 4 and 5, are kind of like the peak of what I consider the quintessential Dynasty Warriors experience. If you were to go back and play the first Dynasty Warriors game for PS1 in 1997, it would be nearly unrecognizable to the games that are out today. Aside from some character similarities, you'd recognize some of the characters. The original game for PS1, Dynasty Warriors 1, was a 1v1 fighting game. And it was in the same vein as Soul Blade, as Samurai Showdown, and Virtua Fighter, just to name a few. It was like a new 3D fighter. This was a surprise to video game critics back in the day, because up until then, Koei had been very well known for its tactics games like Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Nobunaga's Ambition. And I'll shout out one other early game of theirs I know as well, thanks to my conversation with the guys over at Bits of Time. They are responsible for Aerobiz, and if you want to hear more about Aerobiz, go listen to that episode with the guys from Bits of Time. It's a great one. Aerobiz, go check it out. Dynasty Warriors 1 was known as Sengoku Musou, and featured a roster of characters that would become series mainstays going forward, like the God of War Guan Yu, the ambitious Cao Cao, the brilliant Zhou Yu, and the fearsome Lu Bu. So it was called Sengoku Musou. That was the name of the series, and it obviously includes the name Musou, and that is another reason why these games, this genre, are called Musou games. Oh, and by the way, Dynasty Warriors 1, are known as Sengoku Musou in Japan, did not even come out in America. I believe it's been ported via emulation. It's been translated, all that stuff. But it was not known as Dynasty Warriors in Japan. It was known as Sengoku Musou. It wouldn't be until Dynasty Warriors 2 that it would adopt the Dynasty Warriors nomenclature for Western release. But we'll get to that in just a second. When it came to that next game, it was going to be a spin-off hack-and-slash game known as Shin Sengoku Musou, and it ended up being a launch title outside of Japan for the PS2, where it was renamed as Dynasty Warriors 2. we have a situation here. We have a Final Fantasy 3-6 situation here because this caused extreme confusion because the original Sengoku Musou game did not release outside of Japan, and the naming convention for Dynasty Warriors 2 led many to believe that it was a sequel to a game that came out before, which it technically wasn't, considering the first game was a fighting game and it was not just the Sengoku Musou game, it was Shin Sengoku Musou, so it was a spinoff. That first game would still come to be known as Dynasty Warriors 1 after the success of the series outside of Japan, just for continuity's sake. The rest of the mainline games would largely follow the formula established by Dynasty Warriors 2 while continuing to add to the ever-growing roster of characters, enhancing the size and the scope of its storytelling, and making minor gameplay improvements and tweaks between each entry to keep things a little bit fresh. In 2002, starting with Dynasty Warriors 3, Koei would begin the tradition of releasing an expansion version of the game, this was pre-DLC days, known as Extreme Legends, spelled with an X, Extreme, because you know it's cool, and that's how you know it's intense, because it's extreme. This expanded version of the game would feature a new Musou mode story for officers characterized in the other, in quotations, column, so characters that weren't affiliated with the main three kingdoms. In order to play all of the content together from like 3 and 3 Extreme Legends, for examples, players would need the original disc of 3 and needed to enable the mixed joy option to have everything together in one place. Otherwise, you could just play the Extreme Legends content on its own, having only like the fictional stories of the other characters, but still have access to like the entire playable main roster of the main game. That is how I first played Dynasty Warriors. I just had Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends because I'm assuming when my mom or dad bought me the game, they couldn't distinguish between like 3 and like what was the difference, right? I just said I wanted Dynasty Warriors 3 and that's what they bought me. So I only had the expanded stories to go off of and like that roster of characters. The following games in the series would all receive Extreme Legends expansion games. Other than Dynasty Warriors 6, for whatever reason, I didn't dive into that too much. Outline was already going long enough. In 2004, another expansion / spin-off series would be introduced during the lifespan of Dynasty Warriors 4 called Empires. This spin-off was considered its own game and did not require the player to have both discs to access all the content at once. Empires was a combination of the tactical elements of empire building from Romance of the Three Kingdoms with the action-oriented elements of Dynasty Warriors. All games from 4 onward, including 6, which 6 did not get the Extreme Legends treatment, all the games would have an Empires release. So I don't really know what the decision was to not do an Extreme Legends of 6, but do an Empires version of 6. Maybe I should have looked into it a little more, but again, this outline is not about the history of Dynasty Warriors, it's about Origins. I'm just giving you the path to how we got to Origins. There are many, many other spin-off games for handheld, PC, and mobile that I could talk about here. I'm trying to keep these episodes like 2 an hour, so I'll just mention a few of them. In 2006, there was an online game called Dynasty Warriors BB, which was later renamed to Dynasty Warriors Online, and this was an MMO game that was ultimately shut down in 2014. That would have been wild to play. Dynasty Warriors Advance was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2005. There's spin-off games, like I mentioned, Samurai Warriors. There's a Dynasty Warriors Gundam game. There are several Dynasty Warriors Gundam games. Warriors Orochi, which crosses over the Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games into a crazy, like, mythological storyline. One Piece Pirate Warriors, Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, Persona 5 Strikers. If there's been a Musou game with popular characters, Koei and Omega Force have most likely had a hand in it in some way. By the time we get to Dynasty Warriors 9, in 2018, the series is getting pretty stale. 9 tried to do the open world thing with very lackluster results and ultimately would result in a 7-year break in the mainline series until Dynasty Warriors Origins would come out this year. Development information for Origins specifically is kind of scarce right now, but it appears that after Dynasty Warriors 9, there were 2 Dynasty Warriors games that entered production. One being a more traditional sequel in Dynasty Warriors 10, and the other being Dynasty Warriors Origins. After the PlayStation 5 released in 2020, however, production on Dynasty Warriors 10 was halted, and those resources were reassigned to the Origins project. This decision was justified by Origins producer Tomohiko Sho, who felt like fans were getting a bit bored with the series as it was just kind of like releasing the same thing over and over again, especially with how bad 9 was received. And he didn't want to release another familiar sequel. So it seems that from the start, 2 Dynasty Warriors projects enter production. One was eyed as a traditional numbered sequel. Origins was apparently always planned to be somewhat of a reinvigoration of the series, a higher scale project that was going to incorporate more modern elements from recent action games. There were a number of significant changes that would be made to differentiate Origins from prior games. While previous games cover a very large part of the Three Kingdoms history, basically from the fall of the Han Dynasty all the way to almost like the edge of the Three Kingdoms and the reunification of the land. Some of the Dynasty Warriors games would eventually cover that reunification. Origins actually only covers like the first half of the romance novel, and Origins ends with the legendary Battle of Chibi, which ultimately establishes the titular Three Kingdoms. That battle was a really big turning point, also known as the Battle of Red Cliffs. That battle is a really big turning point in history because it had the smaller kingdoms of what would be known as Shu and Wu allying themselves together to fight against the massive kingdom of Wei under the legendary historical character that was Cao Cao. Also, the player only controls a single main character, which is another stark departure from previous games, which featured a large roster of like 50-ish or more than 50 characters that all had unique movesets to choose from. Well, you can have some of like the generals and characters accompany you into battle, and you can switch to them. Their movesets are largely defined by the movesets locked to their specific weapon class. In this game, there's like 8 or 9 different weapons you can use, and like those are your moves, and like that's it. This allowed the team to focus in a lot on major characters instead of forcing you down a path of like supporting a specific kingdom right away. It gives these characters time to like breathe, and you can like learn about them and learn about what their different ambitions are before you choose like who you want to support. And the game has like some branching story paths, which we'll talk about in a second. The only other interesting development tidbit I can offer was that Omega Force aimed for a goal of having 10,000 soldiers on screen at a time, which is really impressive. I don't know if they actually ever like achieved that, but I can tell you that some of these battles and clashes get incredibly massive, and I find myself in the middle of a unending sea of enemy soldiers that you're just like mowing through. And the game doesn't really, at least I didn't experience on a base PS5, I didn't experience too much slowdown, and I didn't really notice a lot of like tricks being used to like hide soldiers and stuff. I felt like I could pretty much go anywhere on the map and jump into a big group of guys and fight them at any time. So maybe they managed to accomplish this goal. I'm not entirely sure, but as I'll talk about in gameplay and storytelling, the amount of things on screen at once and the scale of some of these battles are as big as I have seen in a video game, not using like clever tricks or like having a lot of things happening in the background. Like everything's happening on the battlefield at the same time. All right, I'm going to combine gameplay and storytelling things because they kind of happen together simultaneously, and I'm going to explain to you the way that Dynasty Warriors presents itself, its progression, and how you basically go from story moments to battles, and how big battles kind of serve as moments that move the narrative along. So that's going to be the structure I talk about gameplay and storytelling together. In the past games, usually story beats would play out around the more important battles that you would be playing, depending on who you chose to play in musou mode and what kingdom you chose to support. And then if you wanted to replay those battles, you could just like pick them from a list in free mode and just play the battles without like any advancement in any kind of story or plot and anything. Progression in Dynasty Warriors Origins is much more narratively driven. It leans into the dramatization aspect that the source material Romance of the Three Kingdoms does. It leans into that to drive the game forward between battles. Like I mentioned earlier, where previous games would take you through the entire Three Kingdoms period, Origins gets much more granular and focuses on the first half of the story up until a major historical moment known as the Battle at Chibi, also known as the Battle of Red Cliffs. If it allows you to spend time with some of these fictionally represented historical figures from the fall of the Han Dynasty all the way to the Battle of Red Cliffs, and you get to see way more development of these characters as their individual motivations are fleshed out a little bit more. To do this, you don't play as any characters that have a hand in shaping the events of this time. You play as an original character known by a few names. They're called the protagonist, also called Zilyuan. This person is an amnesiac individual with exceptional martial abilities. You come to find out that Zilyuan is a member of a group called the Guardians of Peace. They are an enigmatic group that operates outside the bounds of legal authority of the Han Dynasty to shape the history of the land and to achieve peace. This is an interesting choice and one of the main departures from the rest of the series, in that you're only playing as this one character. There are usually tons of characters that you can pick from in these games. Like each kingdom has like 15 to 20 guys by the time there are later entries for you to be able to pick from. But the decision to limit this experience to a single playable character allows you to get to know the major players of this time period a little bit better. It allows them to define some more of their character attributes so that you can really get a feeling of what the individual players during this time period were really trying to accomplish. You begin during a time period known as the Yellow Turban Rebellion at the end of the Han Dynasty, and as a wandering hero, you meet all of the major characters of the time period, kind of during this early period that the Romance of the Three Kingdoms takes place, kind of the disintegration of the Han Dynasty. You meet Liu Bei with his sworn brothers Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, who would come to find the kingdom of Shu. You meet the ambitious Cao Cao with his cousins Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan, who would form the kingdom of Wei. And you would also meet Sun Jian, the leader of the Sun clan, who are descendants of the legendary Sun Tzu, who would go on to form the kingdom of Wu. You also meet other major players during this time, not affiliated with any of the specific three kingdoms. You meet government officials trying to preserve the Han. You meet tyrannical warlords looking to take advantage of the chaos like Dong Zhuo. You meet Lu Bu, the most legendary warrior of his time. You meet these other characters who are basically just like warlords of their specific provinces trying to preserve whatever is left of the disintegrating Han Dynasty. The game takes place on a large overworld of China. This is basically your overworld map, and it allows you to move about the map to different scenarios and events that are taking place. Sometimes it's small skirmishes, sometimes it's a conversation that deepens your relationship with a certain character, sometimes it's a major battle that kind of serves as a major bookmark in the current chapter that you're playing. The act of battling has two phases. There is battle preparation and actual battle. During battle preparation, that is when you prep for the battle, obviously. You can select certain items to bring with you into battle that offer benefits like stat increases. You can also pick one of the 8 weapons you have access to that will define your playstyle. And these 8 weapons are the sword, the spear, the gauntlets, the wheels, the podao, the staves, the twin pikes, the lance, the crescent blade, and the halberd. I don't know if that's actually 8. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's actually 10. So there are 10 weapons. My bad. Weapons are the answer to the lack of variety you lose by only playing as one character. They give you some different variety in playstyle, although not as much variety as the movesets of the different characters in previous games. Each weapons kind of have different strengths or weaknesses and are good at certain things and bad at other things. Battles have different win conditions and have you running around all over the map to kind of manage mini skirmishes that are going on. At the end of the day, unless explicitly stated, your basic objective is to just kill everyone and clear the field and win. That's basically like the main overarching objective, unless you're told otherwise. Fighting just regular common soldiers is pretty simple. They're designed to be absolute cannon fodder, to be annihilated in big groups. Officers and major characters are more challenging and have a bar in the form of shields over their head, and you can knock them into a state of stagger by attacking and breaking those shields. Staggering an enemy will allow you to perform a devastating combo to take out a chunk of their health. Officers are also really aggressive. They are much more aggressive than standard soldiers. They can break your attacks. They can take out way more of your health than common soldiers. To give players more options, they introduced a time parry system, as is pretty standard in action games today. Holding L1 will allow you to block attacks that aren't unblockable or telegraphed as unblockable. But if you hit block just as an attack hits you, you will perform a counter that will break some of the enemy's stagger bar. Again, if you played any modern action game or any Souls game over the last 5 to 10 years, you'll be really familiar with these systems. It's just being able to keep track of them in a chaotic environment where there are tons of things on screen at once. There are really some cinematic moments during the battles that elevate their presentation. For example, in some of the battles, there will be moments where both major armies line up from across from one another, and then you can initiate a huge charge where both sides will charge at one another. And I gotta say, it feels cinematic as fuck. If you're on a horse and charging with the other horseback units, it literally feels like you're doing the charge of the Rohirrim from Lord of the Rings. It's one of the coolest experience I've had in a video game, just being part of what feels like a massive clash where two armies are running towards each other. The scale that Dynasty Warriors Origins provides really does feel quite massive. It's something that I have never experienced in a video game before. So that's kind of the standard flow of the game. You'll explore the overworld and have some time to talk and interact with all the different characters. You'll have battles, and then afterwards you'll use skill points to upgrade your various skill trees. So there's some light RPG elements in there. Those things just kind of enhance your health. You can take more damage. It increases your defense. It unlocks different moves you can do. And throughout the story, you'll have a chance to interact with all the major players that I outlined. And through getting to know them, you will eventually reach a pivotal point where the story kind of branches and you're forced to pick who you're going to support, choosing to go the Wei, Shu, or Wu route. Obviously, choosing one locks you out of the other, and these characters even react to you making your choice, acting surprised and feeling kind of betrayed for not choosing them. This offers the game a little bit of replay value once you've beaten it. You have the ability to play the story from anywhere in the timeline, and you can jump around on the timeline freely to kind of experience the parts of the story you missed by pursuing a different route. So, for example, if you just during your first playthrough, if you do the Shu route, and then once you complete that, you want to go back and do the Wei and Wu routes, you can choose to start the playthrough of the story from the moment where those paths kind of branch and then choose to go down each one of them to see how they play out differently depending on who you support, which is a really, really nice touch, not having the player replay all of the stuff leading up to that, because like I said, they really narrow in on the early part of this story, and it takes a significant amount of time to get to that fork in the road where you have to make that decision. So letting the player choose where they can go on the timeline and bounce around is a really, really progressive system, especially for people that don't have a lot of time to play video games. During the story beats between these big battles, you'll sometimes find characters hanging out on the map and you can go and interact with them. And you usually get a little cutscene of dialogue that lets you get to know them a little bit better. And sometimes they'll even give you like training objectives that you can complete in battles to get more skill points. I won't sit here and say that the story is like groundbreaking or on the level of some of the best storytelling that games have to offer, but there is a lot of detail put into the story in terms of the sheer number of characters you can interact with and get to know, and they all have mostly unique personalities that allow them to stand out from one another. And at least if they don't have unique personalities, they're all voice acted and presented in a way that distinguish them from one another, so you can kind of like remember who does what. It was nice getting to spend more time with these characters that I've known for over 2 decades now, and the more in-depth telling of events allowed me to learn even more about a time period that has fascinated me for a long time, even if those events are kind of romanticized and mythologized for the game, and the character you're playing as has no basis in history whatsoever. The storytelling really kind of focuses in on the turmoil of this age and really kind of hammers home how when the Han Dynasty like disintegrated and fell apart, this kind of insane mad struggle for power involved all of these characters and how just chaotic it was and how dangerous those times were. And it really kind of hammers home too how many innocent people were just caught in the middle of this really, really violent time in human history. You know, at the end of the day, it is a video game, and it is damn fun just to go out and have the power fantasy that this game provides. I think it's interesting. I wonder how the people of that time would feel knowing that their lives have kind of become, and the people that they were have kind of become this romanticized, fictionalized versions of the people that they actually were. And now that people from all over the world get to play them as like a video game, I just wonder, we're so far removed from that time that it almost doesn't feel real, but you have to like admit those are actual real people. Like the events that these games and the book are romanticizing are events that actually did take place. So I just like to think back and think, man, how would people of that time react if they knew like how big that story was and in what manner people were interacting with it in this thing called a video game. I think that's kind of funny. There's one aspect of Dynasty Warriors games that I really love, and it's the concept of a character that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned him a couple times. It is the concept of Lu Bu. Lu Bu in Romance of the Three Kingdoms is heavily romanticized as an invincible warrior without equal, and he is represented in this manner in the games. The saying of this time often went, "Among men, Lu Bu, among steeds, red hair," referencing the representation of the man and his steed as the pinnacle of both human and animal performance. Lu Bu's part in this story takes place during the disintegration of the Han Dynasty and the ensuing turmoil before the formation of the Three Kingdoms. And while he was defeated and killed before the Three Kingdoms form, he casts a very, very large shadow for the time that he is in the story. Lu Bu appears earlier during the story when you are still building up your character, and this is true during other Dynasty Warriors games as well. His appearance at the Battle of Hulao Gate is iconic. He shows up at a pivotal moment during the fight, and he is just an absolute force of nature. When he shows up in battle, in the stages he does show up in battle, he affects the flow and morale of the battle more than any other character in the series. When he first shows up in fights, especially early on in games when you're still relatively weak, you are highly urged to avoid him at all costs and rush to finish the battle before he can wreak havoc and kill all of your allies. If you do run into him, unless you are incredibly good at the game or revisiting the battle at a higher level, you are almost guaranteed to lose. I love the narrative implications of this on the story and on gameplay. Sometimes when you have an overpowered character like this, it can be boring, but I think Lu Bu is a perfect example of how to do it the right way. He is physically imposing in every scene he appears in, and his in-game representation is just as fearsome. He and his horse absolutely tower over every other character model on screen in terms of height and just sheer scale. And in the actual battles, Lu Bu is often depicted with like an aura of lightning and power like coming off him. It's like reminiscent of an anime protagonist radiating power off of them. Not quite as like ridiculous. It's like Super Saiyan, but you know, like when the anime character powers up and they kind of have that aura around them and lightning comes out. It's almost like that. He's an absolute force of nature. His menacing presence in the story cutscenes, combined with his absolutely devastating effect on the battle when he appears, provides a character that truly makes me feel fear and anxiety whenever I have to contend with him. And this is evident not just in the battles, but in the cutscenes too. Whenever characters are in cutscenes interacting with Lu Bu when there isn't a battle happening, they are physically uncomfortable with his presence because of the type of character that he is. His story ultimately culminates in the Battle of Xiapi, where he ultimately is defeated by an alliance between Cao Cao and Liu Bei. You straight up have a boss fight with him during this battle, and it's intense. It turns into a one-on-one duel against Lu Bu. You do have other characters that fight. There's a relatively large army that's there fighting with you, including other main characters. So there's like common soldiers and like other main characters that are fighting with you. And it eventually turns into a 1v1 because he defeats every other person that is present. And the fight against him truly tests your skills and knowledge of the game and leaves very, very little margin for error. He'll throw unblockable attacks at you, large AoE blasts, devastating combos. This fight took me a few hours to learn and master. And even then, I was only able to beat him with a sliver of health. There were other fights in the game that were challenging my first playthrough, but none ever exceeded the pinnacle that this battle and this fight against Lu Bu achieved. It was one of the most incredible boss fights I've ever experienced in a video game. Obviously, he is heavily romanticized and heavily mythologized thanks to the Dynasty Warriors video games. And while he showcased pure power and martial skill in battle, historically, he was noted to have a terrible temperament. He wasn't intelligent or subtle when it came to tactics or politics, which ended up winning him many enemies. By the end of his life with the Battle of Xiapi, he did not really have any allies. I think this balances out his unmatchable strength and skill in battle, because if you're going to make a character that's all-powerful in all these physical aspects, to have them have a fatal flaw like requiring tactics or politics to survive in a time when everybody was just betraying each other, that is a significant weakness. Well, ultimately, he would be defeated on the battlefield. It was his brash nature, his rash decision-making, that caused everyone who maybe could have supported him to turn against him. It's a nice narrative theme in the game and maybe in the novel as well, even though I haven't read the novel, that you can't just go through life pissing people off and expect to get ahead, no matter how strong or great you are, no matter what physical or mental advantages you may possess. You cannot just go through life being an arrogant douchebag and piss everybody off and expect to be able to get ahead and achieve your goals when everybody just gangs up on you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the moral of Lu Bu is an interesting story, and I think the way that he's presented in all of these games, not just Origins, but all these games specifically, is really incredible because up until the time you encounter him, you have so much agency. You are the most deadly thing on the battlefield. You're just whirling through hundreds of enemies. You're able to mostly handle most enemy officers and generals up until this point. But when he shows up, when Lu Bu shows up, it's like hitting a brick wall going 100 miles an hour. You are instantly just stopped. It creates a feeling of helplessness that is really unique in other video games until you get to the point where you get a little bit stronger and you do have this truly epic fight with him. So I like the way that they did it here. I always look for how they do Lu Bu in these video games because I think it's a really important aspect of the games. And I think they absolutely nailed it here, not just in the battle, but in the cutscenes and how he was positioned in the story, as well as this absolutely menacing figure of pure strength during his time period that people eventually had to band together. The greatest heroes of the time had to band together to bring him down. So the main goal of this episode was to talk about kind of the origins of the series, no pun intended, talk about kind of where the series had come from, the decisions that made them kind of change direction and do a more updated modern version of Dynasty Warriors that was a little more polished, kind of how we got here, and then kind of tell that the way the game moves you through the story, through narrative and gameplay elements. And I think I largely accomplished that as we're kind of creeping up on an hour here. So Dynasty Warriors Origins came out obviously in 2025. It was early in 2025. It was one of the first kind of games that gained momentum when the year first started. And since then, we've gotten some games that have really kind of stirred up the hornet's nest and have come out and been really, really successful. There's been games that have come out that are having people call 2025 one of the best years in video games ever. And in a year of Titans, in a year where the Game of the Year conversation started basically after last year's Game Awards, Dynasty Warriors appears on the scene early in January and was quickly forgotten about in the wake of the other huge games that have come out this year. Monster Hunter Wild, Blueprints, Expedition 33, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Death Stranding 2. But this game got good reviews when it came out. It generated positive buzz when it came out. It's definitely one of the better reviewed games this year. And by review and sales metrics, it has been relatively successful. And yet, Dynasty Warriors Origins was never going to be in the Game of the Year conversation. It is a game that I would consider putting in the 7 out of 10 club. And I don't mean that I would give it a 7 out of 10. When we talk about 7 out of 10 games, they are games that are not going to win the awards, but they are still very good games and very good at what they do. Me putting Dynasty Warriors Origins in the 7 out of 10 club does not make it a bad game or an inferior game. I would say that it's in this club because there are other games that do what it's trying to do better in terms of cutscene composition, cinematography, voice acting, and even gameplay, despite the fact that no other game really captures the scale and devastation of large battles like Dynasty Warriors does. It's in the same club as Stranger of Paradise, which I think is a fantastic game. It's not going to win awards. It's not going to be argued about amongst the great and all-encompassing Game of the Year conversation, but it is a good game. It is a very good game. And games like this get overshadowed by this obsession with Game of the Year. It's a subjective argument that draws all games that we consider the best towards it in a competition of comparison that doesn't highlight their individual strengths. Dynasty Warriors Origins is a game that will be on sale. Someone will pick it up and realize, holy crap, this game is amazing. But no one has really talked about it because of everything else that has happened this year. And it's not really one of those games that lends itself to this kind of theme analysis or this gameplay analysis in the way that games like Expedition 33 has, or like what Nintendo's doing with Donkey Kong Bonanza. It is what it is, and its narrative is defined by a moment in history that has a lot of sources written about it. And you can only mythologize it and romanticize it so much until it becomes something that is not even remotely tied close to the historical aspect of it. In terms of the series, in terms of Dynasty Warriors as a whole, the formula had become stale. Dynasty Warriors 9 was a disaster and really caused the mainline series to go MIA for 7 years. This is a step up in production quality, in voice acting, in storytelling that I didn't really expect from this series. Usually Koei and Omega Force would try some things to mix up the formula, but they would not dare diverge from it too much and ended up putting out similar experiences game after game after game. While Origins keeps the spirit of the formula intact, it incorporates enough elements from modern action games to make it a game worth experiencing, especially if you are a fan of the series or of musou games or even dramatized history. We need more games like this. We need more games that don't have the insane polish of some of the best experiences that games can offer. Not saying that Dynasty Warriors Origins isn't polished, because I never had a moment in it where I experienced like any kind of slowdown, a game crashing, or any kind of weird things happening in the game. I don't mean that when I mean by polish, but just some of these games that are just way bigger budgets and come out as like what we would call the AAA experience, right? We need more games that are like Dynasty Warriors Origins, games that are just really good. And they come out and they do what they set out to do really well. That's what Dynasty Warriors Origins is. And we used to have like tons of these games, and you used to be able to talk about people and like they would come up with like, be like, yeah, I played this like kind of obscure game and it's just really good. And then you would play it and you'd just be like, oh yeah, that game is really good. But now the only thing people want to talk about is how the game that they're playing fits into the game of the year conversation. And that is like the only analysis happening around video games when they come out. And it's like, if they're not in the game of the year conversation, they're going to come out and like Dynasty Warriors Origins and be hot for a week. And then we're on to the next thing. Whereas versus now we're having this 3-way argument for game of the year about Expedition 33 and Donkey Kong Bonanza and Death Stranding 2 and maybe Blueprints and Kingdom Come Deliverance or whatever else we're having it. And I'm over here saying like, hey, Dynasty Warriors is a good game and you should play it and you should talk about it because it's still a good game, even though it won't win game of the year. But that doesn't mean it doesn't deserve to be talked about. And just because it doesn't win game of the year doesn't make it any less impressive as what it accomplished. But I digress. Dynasty Warriors Origins is really good. It's a really good spot to jump into the series. It kind of walks you through the early history of what's going on. So if you've never played a Dynasty Warriors game before, if you've never played a musou game before, if you have played action games for like the last 5 years, like God of War or anything like that, where you're like parrying and attacking, you'll feel much more comfortable with Dynasty Warriors Origins. Probably more comfortable with this entry than some of the earlier entries, for sure. I went back to Dynasty Warriors 3 and got my ass kicked after I played Dynasty Warriors Origins. I was like, oh my God, am I just bad at video games, or was I just really good at video games when I was a younger kid? Because I'm like, this was really hard. Don't let game of the year or the games that you consider game of the year ruin you playing and trying other experiences and declaring that they are good. Just because something does not win game of the year does not mean it is not good, does not mean that it did not accomplish what it set out to accomplish. Just because a game is not considered for game of the year doesn't mean that it's an experience that you should skip. There are so many games out there that do not win game of the year that are worth experiencing. So just let game of the year go a little bit. Just let it go. It'll be okay. Go play Dynasty Warriors Origins. Go buy it. If you want to wait for sale, pick it up when it's on sale. It's a lot of fun. You'll enjoy it. Please, just trust me. Go play it. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. I didn't mean for some of my end of year, game of the year things to leak in there, but I think this game is worth talking about, and it just makes me mad that people won't talk about things other than the games that are supposed to win game of the year. But that's besides the point. Thank you guys for listening so much, as always. It means so much to me that you come here and you check out these episodes, that you interact with the show. Speaking of interacting with the show, if you want to do that, you can go over to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. Check out all the links for social media. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. I still have an X account, but I don't think it's on the link tree because X I check in with X every once in a while, and just some of the things it recommends me are things that I've never even engaged with or like considered engaging with, or are so far away from my ideologies that I'm just like, why is X recommending these things to me? So I'm on X, but I don't really use it much. The link to the Unlockables Discord is in there. You can join the Discord, and you, if you have the capabilities of recording your thoughts on a game, can submit an audio file to be posted in the Unlockables episode. You can be a part of the Unlockables episodes. I usually every couple of weeks put out a call for thoughts on games that I am getting ready to do episodes on, and then people put them in a nice little Google Drive folder for me, and then I include those in the episodes because it gets me collaborating with my community a little bit, because my life's a little bit hectic and I don't have the chance to have guests on, have 3-hour conversations like I'd like to. So that is my way to be able to interact with the community and have people come on and advertise their stuff and give their thoughts about the game that I'm talking about. So join the Unlockables Discord for that. We got a channel where you can post memes. You can interact with a bunch of awesome other awesome content creators on there. It's definitely a win-win for sure. You can go on over to the Unlockables Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. All the money that I make on Patreon goes to supporting the show, whether it's playing games to review, whether it's upgrading my hardware. I use all that stuff to just make the product I put out a little bit better. It is certainly not necessary. There are a couple things that are exclusive to the Patreon that I'm doing, that I'm working on, but all the stuff on the main feed that you've come to know and love, that stuff all still remains on the main feed. You can get the main feed stuff months in advance if you sign up for the Patreon. I don't know. Go ahead and do that. It would mean a lot to me. I would really appreciate it. But you don't have to. If you are listening on the main feed for free, whatever your podcatcher of choice, please leave a like, a rating, a review, whatever the metric is for providing feedback on your podcatcher of choice. Please do it. Really helps me out. I had to pull all my episodes off of the internet and put that back on there because Spotify was threatening to nuke half of my episodes for copyright stuff. So I just pulled all the episodes off. I switched hosts and I re-uploaded all of them, and I lost all my reviews. So please, if you have time, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review, leave whatever the like is. I don't know. That would really help me out. I would really appreciate it. That's going to do it for this episode of The Unlockables. Thank you guys so much for listening. And remember, it's not just the story of video games, it's the story of you.